Washington mornings on the Mall. 105.9 FM. And AM 630. WMAL.
8:07, good Thursday morning to you. Brian Neiman, Brian Wilson with you. Brian and Brian morning. We've been talking about Cybersecurity Week for a couple of weeks now. It is here. Mike Rogers, a Republican from Michigan, was on the program on Monday. He is sponsoring a bill called the Cyber Intelligence Sharing and Protection Act, also known as CISPA, and there could be a vote on it today. Now, what does CISPA do? CISPA would allow, just in general terms here, would allow companies, private companies,
right,
like phone carriers, AT&T,
Google.
Verizon, Google, Facebook, energy plants, private sector banking industry, things like that, to share information about cyber threats without any kind of consequence, sharing them with other private companies and also with the federal government, meaning Department of Homeland Security and the NSA.
So if they detect a threat, they can get on the phone line and say, hey, we want you to look, we're
worried about this.
We're worried about this. Keep an eye on this. And that would be okay.
With no threat of any kind of harm coming their way. Jim Harper joins us now. He's Director of Information Policy from the Cato Institute. Did I do an okay job of explaining what CISPA is about? I know it goes into more detail than that, but
Yeah, you did a fine job.
Okay, so what's the controversy around that then?
Well, information sharing is good. Information sharing is already happening, actually. There may be some narrow legal limits on information sharing, and we can come back to that. But what Congress is doing in CISPA is saying that there are no legal impediments at all to information sharing. They use language like notwithstanding any other law. So contracts you might have entered into wouldn't apply. If you violate somebody's privacy rights, if you violate the privacy torts, state law, that doesn't apply. The Privacy Act of 1974 doesn't apply. Electronic Communications Privacy Act doesn't apply.
Okay.
E-Government Act, none of this stuff applies. Congress is scything down all kinds of law that protects both our privacy and security by using this extremely broad language to try to create room for information sharing that may be overkill.
So some people are saying it's okay to share information just as long as you don't share it in some circumstances. They still want to put caveats on it.
Well, yeah, and there should be.
And why is that?
We live in a nation of laws. If you've made a promise to somebody that I'm not going to share information about you, and then you go and say to the government, well, you've got a cybersecurity reason why you want to know all this stuff, sure, all bets are off, even though I promised this person something. Most people already have in their contracts, ISPs and all the providers you talked about, they already have in their contracts that they will share information in order to protect their networks and to protect other networks. So it's already within their promises. This idea that all law should be swept aside for this purpose, that's just overkill. And I think Congress should go in, research exactly what laws do stand in the way of appropriate cybersecurity information sharing, and then amend those laws specifically, not mowing down entire sections of law that we don't know exactly what they're doing.
So as we often find, sometimes you write a law and there are some unintended consequences, and that's what you're concerned about.
Unintended consequences, that's the law that you can't repeal. You never can. And that's what we're looking at should this thing pass. Let's take a little bit of time, do the research, find out from the companies that want these legal protections what are the specific laws that stand in the way of what you want to do, and let's amend those. Let's get that regulatory underbrush out of the way. I'm all in favor of that if something's holding them back from doing the right thing. But you don't sweep down all the law just to get at that one problem.
Is this the best way to go about it anyway? I mean, I'm talking about volunteering the information of if you're concerned about a cyber attack. I mean, I know there's another bill in the Senate that seems to be a little bit more drastic, however you want to put it, that would basically give more power to the federal government to work hand in hand with these companies to make sure there isn't a breach when it comes to some kind of power plant, if there's an attack, a cyber attack on an energy plant, a power plant, or the banking industry. Are you totally against that idea as well? I mean, is the voluntary portion of it in the right idea mentally, the spirit of it?
The voluntary sharing is, but let's really start at the beginning with the problem statement. What is the cybersecurity problem? I mean, right now Congress is whipped up lighter than a souffle over cyber attacks.
Yes, they are.
There are real security problems in securing networks and data and computers, but the professionals don't use the word cybersecurity. They're much more specific about the problems they're working on. Cybersecurity is an umbrella that refers to maybe thousands of different problems or tens of thousands of different problems that we'll encounter over decades and frankly, Congress coming in and saying, here's how we're going to fix it with information sharing, and especially with the regulatory approach in the Senate, that's not going to work. That's going to stand in the way, most likely, of really productive work that engineers on the ground are doing right now.
Why are they whipped up, though? They're whipped up because they're being told. They're being told whether or not in private meetings or even some cases public meetings. I mean, Leon Panetta, Secretary of Defense, said the other day that his biggest concern is a cyber attack. My guess is behind closed doors in committees where you have to have security clearance, they're being told, hey, something's going to happen. They've already tried, and they could really do a lot of damage economically to this country if they get away with attacking power grids or banking industry or whatever. I mean, there is a real threat here, right?
Well, let's call it risk. There's real risk from a lot of different dimensions, but the risks will tend to be toward small problems, things that maybe the electric power plant goes down for a day or two. Maybe there's some problem with financial services systems. There are backups. Any company these days has multiple backups of all its systems and all its data, so that stuff will come back up really very soon. Congress is being whipped up by talk of cyber war, of cyber terror. They literally say things like, literally the blood of the nation will be sapped. Well, if you know what the word literally means, they're saying that actual blood will flow because of cyber attack, and that there's a small chance of some kinetic effect that is real-world impact.
Well,
but it will tend to be very contained. It's not something we need to spend billions of dollars or place entire industries under regulation to try to stop it. It may not stop it at all, even if we do all of that.
Let me argue the other side of that, and that is that I think when I talk to national security experts about this issue, the thing that they're most concerned about is that in those moments when our systems are being attacked, we are vulnerable. And that our enemies could take advantage of that situation. I mean, we don't see it out there today that we're going to be attacked, but who knows what tomorrow brings. And if they wanted to come after us, the first thing they would do is take down all our computer systems and take down our electrical grid. And in this moment of chaos is the moment that you would be unprepared for an attack.
Well, the United States, just like it is the military superpower, it is also the cyber superpower. We are the ones in the position of strength. If there is going to be a nation-on-nation battle or a nation versus non-state group battle, we have so much skill and power already in the United States, so much strength in our cyber infrastructure and our knowledge that we're in the catbird seat, and we shouldn't pretend like we're being, we're under attack from powers that are smarter than we are. Obviously, some people will be able to pull off some things. There are kids who are testing networks all the time, but think of this like a biological problem. Many of these attacks will succeed in the first few days. As soon as the engineers figure out what went wrong, they go and patch that software, they go and patch that hardware, and that problem is fixed. The system is stronger.
Well, I agree with you. We need to be careful about the overreaching laws and unintended consequences. I mean, you're absolutely right about that, and maybe we need to take a second look at this. But I have to say I disagree with you about our level of preparedness for cyber attack. I don't think in this country we're near prepared enough. And in fact, I think there's actually already been a pretty significant cyber attack against the electrical grid in this country.
Well, I'd like to hear about it because the people who actually go and investigate these things debunk the claims that are put out there. There have been 2 cyber attacks with kinetic effect, that is real-world impacts. One was in Brazil, and it was somebody who had written the software that controls a water treatment plant. He dumped a bunch of sewage onto a golf course, and that kind of thing stunk. Mm-hmm. The other is Stuxnet, and that's the virus that hit the Iranian nuclear program. Mm-hmm. That almost certainly was developed right here in the United States, perhaps with Israel. It was very sophisticated. It used, many what they call zero-day attacks. That is, problems that have never been discovered before, and it wove them together in an incredibly clever way. It's not something anyone can turn around and use on other systems or use on the United States because it was a real one-off. But that's the only other attack with kinetic effect. When you go through the list, and there are these laundry lists of attacks that have happened, you go through and you discover that was just a software failure. It wasn't somebody's attack, or it was a squirrel chewing through a power line and it caused a cascade that took out the electrical systems. It wasn't some attacker. It was some flaw in the system itself. we've experienced what it might be like.
Right.
A few years ago, New York, the power went out,
Right.
and
Yeah.
New Yorkers came together. They took care of themselves. There wasn't panic.
Right.
Some people died. This happens in our world that people do die when there are big events.
Right, Jim. We're way over on time. We're going to have to leave it right there. But thank you so much for joining us here on WMAL. We greatly appreciate it.
Jim Harper, Cato.